God bless everybody. Today it's December 15th of 2023. What I wanted to concentrate today on is the state of the economy. This is mainly the U.S. economy, but it radiates out to the global economy since we are the world currency. So when I want to look at the true state of this economy and I want to get real numbers, I usually come out here because this is real time numbers. As you can see, this is happening as we speak. Um, there's a number of sections in here. I would just want to hit a number of these different things so you can actually see what's going on out here and you get a feel for just how strong this economy truly is and truly how indebted we are and why this is not going to be able to hold up forever. And we are going to see a reset of this financial system someday, because especially if they have to hold these rates at about 5.25 to 5.5 and they hold it. Now they may raise it again. Nobody's sure what they're going to do because it depends on the data driven numbers that they're getting. But we know that we can look at these numbers and get a really good handle on just what's happening in all the different sectors and how the average person is doing and what the state of the economy truly is. So let's get into some of these different areas. First thing I want to look at is, of course, the national debt. And it's interesting that this is a nice chart because when you pan over the specific thing you're looking at, it gives you this nice little indicator over here that tells you what it is. Okay, so we always hear about the U.S. national debt and that we're approximately at this point 34 trillion in the hole, and that's extremely important. These are the numbers that they actually produce to you on the books, and you can see these numbers. And like I said, when you pan over this, it gives you this little description over here. And so it gives you a definition for a lot of these terms and or what's equated into each of these numbers so you can understand just exactly where the numbers are coming from. So this is extremely important. It's a good learning tool. You should be educated in what's going on in your economy and in your country and in the world to determine to make better financial choices for your families and to build a financial future for your families. Now, we don't know if this is going to hold up in the next 4 years. So when you go to this first number, which is in the U.S. national debt, it gives you this nice little definition over here. And so we can look at that real quick. That's the national public debt outstanding represents the face amount or principal amount of marketable and non-marketable securities currently outstanding. So when you hear about the national debt, they're going to show you this number here. Okay. If you look at this number, this is the amount of debt per citizen based on this number. And if you go over here, you can look at the U.S. population, which is about 30 or 335 million at this point. So basically this number is divided by a lot of different numbers out here so you can get an understanding on per person on their debt. In this case, the debt per citizen is $100,000 and $912. So each of you at this very moment, no matter whether you pay taxes or not, owe basically $1,000 to the government to be able to catch us up with this debt alone. Now, this is just the debt on the books that they show you, okay? That's not the debt as we're going to get into these charts. For each taxpayer, because not all of you are taxpayer of these 335 million, you only have approximately, and this is an interesting number, you only have approximately 128 million U.S. income taxpayers, okay? You have a workforce of approximately 161 million, which is less than half this. And so the participation rate, the last time I looked, and I'm not going to go out and actually look it up, but it's about 62%. So you need to realize that there's a large portion of the population that really doesn't work and bring in taxes. And so they're always trying to figure out a way to squeeze the portion of the taxpayers that do. Now, you can also see in this chart, and we'll go back up there in a second, that there's private sector jobs, self-employed jobs. You get into the union jobs, the government employees, the manufacturing jobs. And what's really interesting on that is it shows you the manufacturing jobs now, which are approximately 13 million. But look what's happened there. A lot of these jobs that we had since 2000 have fallen away. A lot of jobs. So if we had 13,000, we've lost over 4.1 million manufacturing jobs in this country since 2000. And that's showing you that we're moving to more of a service-oriented type economy than a manufacturing economy. And we would have to look at and break down these numbers on whether the manufacturing jobs are starting to come back or we're losing more jobs than we already are. In this case, the duration shows that we're losing more manufacturing jobs in the last 23 years, approximately 4.1 million manufacturing jobs since 2000. You have so many retirees, you have so many disability people. It shows you, like I said, the people in the workforce, which is interesting here because, and like I say, I'm going to go back to that upper chart there in a second, but I wanted to show you and give you a breakdown so you can understand the workforce and where these taxes come from. The workforce hasn't increased in 23 years. Well, it has about 400,000 or less, about 350,000. So think of the population jump in the last 23 years, the amount of migrants and people that have come into this country, but we really aren't employing any more people than what we originally were 23 years ago in 2000. About 350,000 more. That's saying a lot when you're bringing in 4 million people a year through our broken border system. So it's extremely important that we understand that we're not really gaining on the participation of people that want to work and pay taxes. And so if we could get more people to actually work and pay taxes, you wouldn't be owing this huge amount over here. And so you have to look at these two numbers and realize that the official unemployed and the actual unemployed are extremely skewed to the downside, and that's why you have this extremely low unemployment number that Joe Biden is throwing down on you, like 3.7%, because, well, 62% of the population doesn't work or can't work or don't need to work, and these numbers are extremely low, okay, because they don't calculate anything that matters out here to you, and it skews the numbers. So here is your full-time workers and your part-time workers, and so you can understand the breakdown of the population working. Of these 335 million people, you have approximately 135,000 or 135 million um, full-time workers and about 26 to 27 million part-time workers. And I would suspect that this number is going up because we're getting a lot of people that are getting 2 or 3 jobs to deal with this inflationary problem that we're having in the economy right now. For them to stay afloat, keep their bills paid, a lot of people are taking on 2 or 3 jobs, and you can see that a large portion of the jobs that are out there are part-time jobs, not full-time jobs, and a lot of these do not have benefits, as you can see on this chart in some of these other areas. And what I mean by that is they don't have insurance, they aren't offered insurance through their employer, different things like that, because when you're a part-time worker, a lot of times you don't get those kind of benefits. So you just need to break these numbers down so you can understand them. And so just realize that you got 335 million people in this country approximately, and you have approximately 160 million people working in the workforce by the time you add full-time and part-time employees. But then a lot of these are uh, people have multiple jobs, and so that's actually, this number is actually skewed to a certain degree because you don't know how many people are working a full-time and part-time job or multiple part-time jobs to survive out here. So I want to come back up to this chart, but I wanted to give you a breakdown of the workforce so you can sort of understand what the work participation is, what type of workers we have, if they're full-time, part-time jobs, what the population is. And so you can start to see, once we go through these numbers, you can see the breakdown. You can also understand how that affects you as a citizen and each person out here, and the whole picture also at the same time, for all citizens. So you need to understand those numbers before you can really go into these numbers and actually understand how this is affecting you personally. So we have 34 trillion almost on the books and on debt. There's 101,000 dollars per citizen if you get to the taxpayer, because not everybody works. As I've shown you on the other section, you approximately, each person, each one of you owe approximately $260,000. Now, I don't know about you, but it would take a lot of years for most people to come up with $260,000 in their lifetime to pay the debt off of the government. And as you can see, we are spending like drunken sailors. So this is the U.S. federal spending right now this year. So Joe Biden, as much as he wants to tell you how Biden economics works, Joe Biden spent 6.2 trillion this year. This year's about over, thank God. And we are now, and he talks about budget deficit and how we have this Inflation Reduction Act and how this is supposedly helping us all, but somehow we still have, because Joe Biden's not bringing enough money into the government through taxes, because not a lot of people are working because the participation rate's only about 62%, you got a deficit of about 1.8 trillion. Now this is pretty easy to understand, and I'll show you why. So when you go in and type in 34 trillion times 5.5, which is the tax rate, you get approximately $1.9 billion. And so when you go back to the other number, now this is potentially 5.25, so you can look at it that way also. So that's what I was saying, you owe approximately 1.8 trillion in deficit due to just taxes, okay? So you're bringing in approximately 4.4 trillion in taxable revenue. You're spending 6.2 trillion, because we're almost to the end of the year. We only have about 15 days left, 16 days left. He's overspending this year by 1.8 trillion, and this is complicated and compounded due to the amount of interest rate hikes they made in the last year and a half by 5.5% approximately. Okay, so that's why you got this deficit amount here, is because Joe owes approximately, through the government, through all of our debt, through the national debt. Now this isn't derivatives and stuff, and actual debt that's outstanding in the country. This is just what they have on the books that they tell you about. But you have this 1.8 trillion affected by that 5.5 or 5.25% interest rate hike that they've been doing. Now, as you can see, This is your actual spending, okay, and your actual deficit. This is the official, and so they're lying to you on the numbers already. They never give you the numbers. They always move them down so it makes them look like it's a little better. And that matters because you can see in 1960 we had a federal debt to GDP ratio of about 52%. And that's fluctuated up to 2000 where it almost maintained the same level. But look at it now, it's actually 122.51%. And if you actually go into the total debt of the GDP ratio, you're at 135.43%. So you're 35% overspending your money at this point right now because the total debt to GDP ratio is 135%, and that's negative. Okay, so that's extremely important. Um, there is a number of countries now that are over 100% GDP to debt ratio, and since we can't quit spending money, that is going to increase. And one of the really interesting things I want to show you on here is that you can create what they call a time machine here. So I'm going to do this real quick and hopefully I won't mess up the chart. So you can click this out till let's say 27. And when you do that, you can see how that's changed, okay? So in 27, the national debt would be 45, almost 46 trillion. You would owe as a taxpayer or people that pay taxes about 323,000 and per citizen 129,000 with spending over 10 trillion a year with deficit spending of taxes and different things like that of approximately 3 trillion, and you move into 150%, 151% GDP to debt ratio, which is insane. You know, we're moving closer and closer to where we're spending twice the amount of money that we're bringing in, and that is always a recipe for disaster. So if we click back and we go back to the original chart, and I just wanted to show you just how extreme that is. Another thing that I think is extremely important, I'm going to do this real quick too. If gold is at $2,000 an ounce right now and the debt is at 34 trillion, when you actually move it to this 27 chart, and this is a speculation by a lot of the economists out here that when you get to 45 trillion, gold would be approximately $3,000. And that makes sense because if you go back in the time of history, you can see gold is moving up with the national debt and how much debt we have in this country. And so that's extremely important that you can follow that. Now, if we do have a geopolitical nightmare out here, gold could X up even higher and the national debt could go up even faster. So it's extremely important. But I also think it's extremely important that if you look at this and you realize that gold is approximately $2,000 at 33 trillion, and 4 years later, gold could be worth $3,000 at 45 trillion in debt, then you could see potentially a increase of $1,000 in your gold just in a short period of time, where you could see that move up by, a third. That's a good investment, and I always go to metals. I'm not an economic advisor. I can gonna tell you to buy metals. I do hold some physical metals because I think they're a good. Well, they're real money. They're not paper money, which is fictitious money that's printed in thin air basically and on pieces of paper, which don't really mean anything because once your regional currencies go away or global currencies go away, which happen every 70 years or so, the paper money's not worth anything. And so it's extremely important. And while we're on this topic, I want to say one more thing about gold and silver. So if you go to this section down here, you can see that now this is an interesting chart, and they're showing you this path up here for a reason, and this is extremely important that I show you these numbers, okay? So gold right now and silver are valued at 0 per ounce because why? It showed you back in 1913 that an ounce of silver was $2.71 and an ounce of gold was 26.72, and that's what I mean. Look at the price of gold now. It's at $2,000, so look how it's xed up over the years. And the reason that gold ratio now is at zero is because we're literally losing dollars in the system. Approximately $770 billion are being lost every year. That's a lot. We only have approximately $21 trillion of money or actual physical dollars in the system. And you can see how that's increased since 2000. So they've done a lot of printing of money since in the last 23 years. But because the valuation of money is going down because of inflation and they keep printing money, we actually lose 771 billion every year in dollar supply because they basically evaporate in thin air because of the way the system is set up. And this is the M2 money supply is a year over year change in the US money supply. So you're losing 771 billion every year. That's extremely important. Now, I've talked about gold and silver some, and silver has been extremely depressed at this point. It's actually at about an 80 to 1 duration to gold. And what I mean by that is you can buy approximately 80 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, okay? And it may not be quite that high because you're at about $25, $23 to $25 in silver to approximately 2,000 $2,040 in gold, so you have to figure out what the duration, the percentage actually truly is there. But if you look at this, what they're saying is in the next 5 years, they could see silver and gold moving up tremendously. And that's why I keep, and if you hit a patch like I believe we're going to go into where you see the market slowly crash out and everybody piles into monetary metals and things like that, these numbers would X up tremendously. And I truly believe that silver, because it's depressed at 80 to 1 duration right now, you would see that move back to a normality, which is about 20 to 1 duration, which means that silver would X up 4 times faster than gold based on that calculation. So should you go out and buy silver and gold? I don't know. To me, it's a good investment. I'm not really invested in the markets and stuff like that, and so I have to look at other different asset classes and things like that. I'm not a financial advisor, but at 23 to $25 an ounce right now for an ounce of silver that potentially could X up 4 times in the next few years. I'm willing to throw a few dollars down on that. And also, if the money systems fail, this is extremely important. So if the dollars fail, you hope to counteract that destruction by putting it in metals, because as the dollars fall in value, your metals will move up in value, and so you can counterbalance that issue of losing your wealth. And that's why they always say it's a wealth transfer, because when the markets crash, usually the people without money don't have gold and silver, and so they lose all their cash, all their retirements, all their 401s, all their pensions, everything, and they have to restart over. Where the people, the 1%, because only about 1% of the population actually own physical gold and silver, their money goes up, and they then also can buy at the bottom because they have the asset classes to buy the properties and stuff when the market crashes at the fire sales, because their asset class of gold and silver and all other things have gone up. They can liquidate them and buy a lot of these other assets, and so their portfolio keeps moving up. And so that's why the 1% always get ahead, and you don't, because you have everything locked in dollars, which are just digits in thin air that aren't really intrinsic value coins. And I don't mean intrinsic value that they're worth more due to, a collector coin, but a gold coin or a silver coin is always going to retain its value and move up. And you can see that because back in 1913, an ounce of silver was $2.71 and an ounce of gold was 26.72. And now look at them. They're about $23 to $25 an ounce. And silver's moved up to $40 an ounce at sometimes. And gold is at its record high at approximately just over $2,000 right now. So you can see that it's extremely important that you hedge against potential loss in one place or the other, and you want to diversify your portfolio so that you can actually not lose all your wealth if the markets do crash. And it's extremely important that you understand why you should probably invest in some metals. A lot of people will say 10% of your portfolio. I consider about 20% of your portfolio ought to be in physical metals, because if they 4x up, that will then counteract any loss on the financial side of the paper money. Now, a couple things I want to bring to your attention. In the money creation portion, you can read this little article if you want, when they issued dollars and different things like that. Janet Yellen has been basically printing the excess money that we need to shortfall this deficit up here. So you can see Janet's printing approximately our shortfall. Now, one thing that you need to understand is we have approximately, because the government has been buying mortgage-backed securities and all kinds of things, they have approximately $9 trillion on their books, okay, that they have to sell off someday. And this also causes additional inflation when they add these dollars back into the system. So that's a real problem. But yes, Janet Yellen has for some time, and you've got to do a lot of printing to put $1.6 trillion in bonds and treasuries out there for people to buy to maintain this servicing of this debt that they're increasing us by constantly. So she's filling this gap, okay? And that's what I mean is they're spending more money than we can physically print. They're not printing dollars. We're not adding that many dollars into the system. It's the debt through the treasury that we're acquiring on the books of the $9 trillion that they produce through treasury and notes that they're literally put us in a hole from, okay? And then if you go to this last column, which is the derivatives, currency and credit derivatives now, look at this number here. You are $637 trillion in the hole. This is money that basically is a contract between 2 or 3 people, because what will happen is the banks loan money to you. They create a contract that you're going to pay this money back with potential that you would default, and then you have these third parties come in, buy up this debt and hedge on it because they want to eliminate some of the risk out here. So when you go and look at this term up here, a derivative or credit default swap, or a CDS, is a credit derivative contract between two parties. The buyer receives a payoff if an underlying financial instrument defaults, okay? But then you have these guys that come in and hedge, and so they buy up a lot of this debt and they put it in a third party. They're hoping to get a return based on the performance of that company, with a risk that that company may default over time and they may lose their money, and they hope that they get a higher premium if the company does well. So it's extremely important that you understand that at this very moment, we have on paper, and this is what I mean, you have on paper $637 trillion of money in digits that somebody has to pay off someday. Um, and as you can see, this has increased tremendously in the last 23 years, where we were approximately 93 trillion, 94 trillion. You're at 637 trillion in derivatives, okay, or debt on paper between multi parties. This is a real problem because there's no way to pay this kind of debt off. Not when you're making 4.4 trillion in a year. You know how many years it would take to pay this off? It'd be insane. And this is part of the problem, is that we are basically spending ourselves into hole. And I talked about how they're going to reset this and change the ledgers so that basically they'll probably move it into a digital currency because they can't deal with the dollar fiat currency issues that they're having with when they're spending this kind of money. It's impossible for them to do this. Okay. And if you look at the gross domestic product, this is the money that we bring in every year through the basic measure of market value of all final goods and services made within the borders of the U.S. within a year. Once you subtract your workers' compensation, your federal employee spending, that gives you your total debt to GDP ratio. And so you realize that we're constantly losing this battle. And this number is moving up tremendously as we go forward. So, and you can also look at this. The revenue to debt to GDP ratio is approximately 29%, where the spending is at 37%. Okay, this should be opposite. Okay, we should be actually bringing in 37% and spending 29%, but we're of course inverted on everything at this point. So this is a real problem when we get into these kind of numbers. It's interesting here. This also gives you the U.S. debt held by foreign countries, which is approximately $8 trillion. You have a U.S. Trade deficit of about $1 trillion. You have a trade deficit with China of about $267 billion. And then you have, this shows you also U.S. imported oil, which we should not be importing oil. We were a exporter and self-sufficient in oil, and so we're spending $250 billion in oil that we shouldn't be spending anything on. So that's sort of important. So why aren't you getting ahead in the world? These numbers pretty much reflect that reason. So the median income, now look at these numbers because this is extremely important. You understand that you're not getting ahead. And I think these numbers tell a lot because the average income or median income of a person today is about $36,148. In 2000, it was 32,143. So you can see in 23 years, the median income of the average person is not going up. But when you look at the expenses of the average person, the median new home is $424,000, which has gone up 3 times in the last 23 years. And so that's why nobody can afford a home, especially if you have to put 10 or 20% down on your home. You know, who's got $80,000 to throw down on a down payment before they start making payments of $2,000 or $3,000 a month, if you can even get on a 30-year fixed loan, because regional banks want to put you on a 7-year predatory adjustable loan that you have to redo 5 times before you get through the 30-year durational period of a normal 30-year fixed loan that you would get on a home. And you can't really go at 15 years because who can afford to cut or to pay twice what they're going to pay on this home as an average person is insanity. So that's why nobody is buying homes now. And the prices of homes just keep moving up and up and up. Now they are starting to fall because demand isn't there, but yet there's a supply issue which is holding up the prices to a certain degree. And if you go out and rent, you'll realize that those have gone up and X'd up tremendously over the years also. And look at this, in the year 2000 when I could afford a car, it was $22,000. Now an average car is approximately 51,000, almost 52,000, and you have to look at those raises they just gave their employees because they're telling us that an average car could move up between 1 and 10,000 depending on the make that they're producing, because now they are paying these union workers so much more money than they were in the last few years. That's going to change as we move forward due to this new contract that they have. But one other thing I want to point out is look, the average guy that doesn't work for the government's only making about 36,000. But when you go into a municipal or government job, they're making almost $74,000. That's twice what this guy down here is making, okay? And on top of that, these guys a lot of times get full benefits. Much more better insurance and different things, pensions and stuff like that, than this guy down here who's trying to make it on a 401. Rarely do they have pensions at this level, and that's why a lot of people go to these government jobs. And as you can see, as you move into the U.S. labor force, that the government employees are approximately 24 million. 24 million out of the U.S. taxpayers that actually work, 24 million of them are on this system here. And that's another thing you'll notice is that when you see these numbers come out, especially this last month, there was a lot of government jobs created. We just had approximately 80,000 potential IRS workers come into the workforce. And so the government can prop up their employment numbers every month by just hiring on people because they collect your taxes to do so, and so they can rig these numbers to make them look like their unemployment is actually 3.7 when you literally have no participation rate. I mean, 100 million people are not in the workforce. Okay. That is insanity in numbers. Okay. You only have approximately, like I said, 135 million full-time workers, 27 million part-time workers. A lot of these full-time workers are working part-time jobs, or these part-time jobs, people are working 2 or 3 jobs. But I'll guarantee you these guys aren't working 2 or 3 jobs up here, and they're getting nice benefits in this process. So the government loves to build government because it makes them look better. It also drives up this median income because these people are making more money. So the people on the low rung are getting screwed because these numbers never reflect their situation. Another important thing to look at is look at the bankruptcies this year, and the foreclosures, and the people living in poverty, and the people without insurance. Oh, I thought everybody was going to get insurance. 27 million people in this country don't have insurance, but they're willing to give these illegals all these different benefits. They're not willing to give you any benefits. We have 610,000 homeless people in this country, but yet we can't give them money. We give our money to everybody else, so we won't even take care of our own homeless people. And a lot of homeless people want to be homeless, so it just depends on their situation. But look at this. That fentanyl traffic that's coming through the borders created, and it's not just fentanyl here, but 120,000 people die from fentanyl and other drug-related issues every year. And then they come down on the gun destruction of life when that is much less than what the drug deaths are. And I can show you that because it's about a third of the drug deaths. So they can say a lot about how guns kill so many people, but drugs kill a lot more people, and it's a lot of this fentanyl that's being pushed through the southern border that Joe Biden won't stop. Okay, it's coming through China and all these other places through these cartels, Mexico, and these southern American countries. Okay, so they can complain about drugs or guns killing all these people, but it's about a third of what it actually is when you get into the drug deaths. And so we need to understand how to break these numbers down. And a lot of these are suicides. And we're going to see these suicides through guns and fentanyl and and drugs increase as the system breaks down and people start to lose hope, and then they do things that um, they shouldn't do, and that is by committing suicide and things to put them out of their misery in general. So it's interesting that if you go down into this section, you can see the total personal debt per citizen, which is approximately $75,000. That's insane. You know, when you're making only $37,000 median income and you're approximately $75,000 in the hole in general, that is a bad sign because that's a 2-to-1 ratio. You can see the amount of student debt per person. This is what Joe Biden's been trying to eliminate, but he can't get the approval. Even the Supreme Court shot him down twice, that he cannot give taxpayer money to pay off these loans so that he can get votes. And that's what Joe's trying to do when he does that. He's not really trying to help you. He wants your vote. And so he figures if he pays off all these student loans, he'll get his vote and be able to maintain his power, and then he can spend his 6.2 trillion every year. Credit card debt is about approximately $1.3 trillion, and of those card holders, they're approximately $8,000 in debt uh, in general. And when you have a median income at $36,000, it's a lot of payment every month to come up with a payment on a $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 credit line. Okay, so it's extremely important that you understand that we are in a debt credit based system. Everything that we do from the minute you put your money into the bank goes into digits, because the digits are on your paper of your check. You put those digits in the bank. The digits go from the bank to the Fed, where they loan their money to get their interest rate on the 15th and the 30th based on the 2-year rate of the bond. And then they get paid on the 15th and the 30th because they make interest off your money. And then they might loan you some money, but they don't have any cash. Now, there is something right now where they're starting to put restrictions on the banks, and they're actually forcing them to hold approximately about 20% of their cash, which at one time they didn't hold any cash. So that should tell you that the banks are under duress and that they want these banks to hold money in case they have massive outflows or people taking money out against them. And these banks won't collapse like we saw in March when we had that 100-point inversion and we lost 3 or 4 banks, and they had to cannibalize those banks and sell them to other banks. And all you have to do is go back and look at Credit Suisse and see what happened there and how it was purchased for a very low amount, and then how it was restructured. And a lot of those people in Credit Suisse lost their jobs, and that bank was totally restructured. And so we see, and as we move forward, the large banks are starting to cannibalize the smaller banks, and that's what they want, is approximately 6 main banks out here with all other banks under these chapters, under their shingles. They may name them the same, but they purchased up and absorbed all these banks as they start to fail. And then we get this huge, basically mega banks. And that's why I always call them the big six, because that's really where they want. They want six banks running basically everything. And we just had that big banking conference with the Congress, where they had to sit there and um, listen to all the new restrictions and everything. And the banks are very concerned about these new restrictions and how they have to hold 20% money and different things like that because of these failures in the spring. They're now putting tighter restrictions and limitations on these banks, which is causing all kinds of problems out here, because when they put restrictions like this on the banks, they won't loan to people, especially in this high interest rate environment. So it's extremely important when we look at all this. They have tightened up restrictions so much that very few people are loaning to anybody, or people just don't have the credit to go out and actually borrow, or the cost of the home or the cars and things like that cost so much more now than what they did before, that they can't literally give them a loan because they don't have the credit or the position to do so. So a couple other things I wanted to bring up to your attention is you have this income tax revenue of about 2 trillion. You have a payroll tax revenue of about 1.7 trillion, and then you have an excise tax, which are a flat tax on specific goods that are not a percentage of the general goods, like sales tax. Half this tax comes from gasoline. So $42 billion of your taxes are on gas taxes. And another thing you need to understand is you're not getting taxed just by income tax. You're getting taxed by sales tax and excise tax on gas and any other tax that they want to put down on you. So by the time you figure out the amount of taxes that are literally being thrown down upon you, you have no income left to spend at the end of the day. And that's why a lot of people say you will own nothing and you will be happy to rent, because you won't have the capacity to do anything on it about it at these kind of spending, because they need your taxes to offset their drunken sailor spending that they're doing here, as Janet Yellen's printing treasuries like a drunken sailor to prop up their deficit spending to make sure that they fill this gap. But there's a point where Janet can't print this many treasuries and sell them, and maybe nobody wants the treasuries. And so if they can't sell the treasury, that causes them a real shortfall as we move forward. So it's extremely important when you go through these charts that you really look at the titles, you look at what, when you pan over here, you can see, learn about some of this stuff. Go out and look at what's going on out here. Just this alone should tell you something. You have 1.5 trillion in Medicaid, Medicare spending that we have to, these are the largest budget items. You have 1.4 trillion in Social Security going out, which is going bankrupt. And then we spend approximately 832 or 3 billion in defense and war. And on that alone, we pay approximately 700 billion in interest, because the rates have gone up to about 5.25 to 5.5. So that's what I mean. That's another reason they don't want to raise these rates anymore, because they keep pushing more money to where we have a bigger deficit, because the interest keeps compounding this problem. And so if you go to 6%, that would just exacerbate this problem. They want to cut, but they can't cut before inflation is under control. And they keep talking about how inflation's come down, but if you go to super core or core inflation, that hasn't changed at all. Core inflation is still about 4%, and it's not changed in the last couple years, year and a half. One of Powell's main mandates through the Fed is to push core back down to 2%. Okay. So he hasn't accomplished really anything because core is still approximately what it was originally, which is at 4%, regardless of what the other inflation numbers are looking at. They're looking at core rate. Okay. To get to 2%, they're going to put a lot of pain down on you and they're going to force a lot of people on unemployment. As you watch us work through this uh, last quarter, fourth quarter, and we move into the new year, you're going to watch a lot of layoffs. I just noticed that Hasbro, the toy company, right before Christmas laid off like 1,000 people. That's a bad sign when you're laying off people before Christmas when you're a toy company. Okay? And I say that the union contract through the auto workers is going to be a bad thing because they're paying these people 25% more basically in the next few years. They're going to jack the prices of cars up. And so what's going to happen is as these contracts run out or the companies realize that their margins are getting squeezed due to the higher payrolls that they're putting out, insurance and other things that they're having to match, what they're going to do is they're going to move these jobs to Mexico, and a lot of these people are going to get pink slips after the first of the year. So they basically shot themselves in the foot. You know, there's no way you can give anyone a 25% raise, not expect your median car to go up approximately $1,000 to $10,000 depending on the make of that car, and that people that have no real income are going to be able to afford these cars and these homes, and that's why no one owns anything anymore. You're going to see massive defaults start to hit the landscape here. Commercial properties, homes, cars, boats, RVs, all this stuff that they bought through the pandemic, people are going to start repoing this stuff and taking it back. And the banks don't know what to do with all this stuff, so they're going to stick it on a lot because they can't sell it through the auction houses and stuff like that. And a lot of these things are just going to sit, and they can't maintain properties, commercial properties, especially when nobody wants them. And so we're watching this happen in China. There is a massive fallout in the commercial and real estate markets there, and we're having the same issues here. So the last thing I want to bring to your attention is this last set of columns down here on the bottom. And it's hard to read this because every time I pan over it, it does some stuff. So you got small business assets here. You got corporate assets here. You got household assets here. You got U.S. total assets and assets per citizen. Okay, but then I want you to notice something here. Then you have liabilities. Okay, so this is the asset side. This is the liability side. So once you add in Social Security, Medicare, and unfunded U.S. liabilities of $212 trillion, unfunded liabilities of $212 trillion, you get a deficit of $631,066 per citizen liability. But they only have $660,523 in asset, which means on average, the average guy approximately owns about $29,000 in physical assets on the ground. That's including their homes, their cars, and everything. That number is shrinking as this debt increases over here and we add more and more people onto the system because nobody's working up here. Okay? So these liabilities keep piling on, and sooner or later you will get an inversion of liability to asset, which is not what you want, because that means you'll own literally nothing before long. And that's what they want. They want you to own nothing and rent everything. So good luck at buying a home. You're going to fall into a trap. You're going to watch these rates go down. People are going to fall into a trap, and then they're going to watch these rates go way up, and people are going to get locked into a higher rate than they were, let's say, 2, 3 years ago when you saw a 3 or 5% rate. Now you're seeing 7%, which could meld up into double digits as we move forward, and this starts to collapse as we move forward. So I just wanted to bring a lot of this to your attention. There's so many other things we could look at here, but I think I've hit a number of these different sections and groups of numbers so you can understand. You can also see the healthcare costs of what we paid back in 2000 compared to the healthcare cost today, which is about 3 times as high in the last 23 years. And you can also see the college tuition has moved up extensively from 2000 to now. And so that's why we have this massive debt over here through the student loan, is because they're paying almost $27,000 a year for a college education. And in my opinion, in 2000, that college piece of paper, that degree was worth something, because now everybody has a degree. Those college education or degrees aren't worth nearly the money that you're spending on them. And if you go into $100,000 to $150,000 in debt because you have additional expenses when you go to college, it's not just tuition, you realize that you're $150,000 in debt before you even get into the workforce, that you're going to be spending a whole lot of money trying to pay this student loan debt off. And look at that. On average, you have $39,000 per student in physical debt. Now, some of these loans are getting paid off, but a lot of them aren't. And when Joe Biden comes out and keeps telling people he's going to pay them off, they figure he's going to do that, even though he doesn't have the ability. And the Supreme Court's come out here twice and told him basically you can't do that. But that doesn't seem to deter Joe. He's gonna try for the votes, and he's gonna lie to you that he has the ability to pay off your student loans. And that's a lie, because he doesn't. You go out and you look at the Supreme Court determinations. Joe Biden does not have the ability. Only Congress has the ability to allocate money for this type of process. It cannot be done through an executive order, because it's your taxpayer money that's paying for all this. So I just wanted to cover a lot of these numbers. I think it's extremely important that you understand the state of the economy and just how bad it is, and that we are literally out of control in the derivatives and the paper money that we literally have on the books that no one's paying for. If you were to get a huge amount of defaults on these derivatives, that would be something that we can't handle in our system, because no one has $640 trillion in paper money, or money that's on literal paper that really is a contract between 2 or 3 parties. And you have 213 trillion in unfunded liabilities, which literally forces you in a box where the government says you literally owe $631,066 per citizen to pay off our unfunded liabilities. You know this is an unsustainable system. And this is per citizen, not per taxpayer. Okay, this is per citizen, per U.S. citizen. So that's where this 335 million come in, divided by your liabilities gives you this number here. So just realize all these numbers matter to you. The government is spending you in the ground. I've talked about a possible reset from a paper fiat currency called the dollar to the SDRs, or the standard reserve that the government wants to put in as a crypto type system. So they'll change it to a digital money, because why would you use paper when you can put everybody on a digital system, give them a card, track everything that they do from their medical, and also build it into a green card, which they can follow your green footprint. And so everything will be on the card and you'll be locked into the system. And so they can either determine, whether they like your buying and spending habits, whether you're doing, you're donating to certain groups. They can track all this stuff. That's one of the reasons they want to get away from the fiat currencies, is because they can't track your movements when you're paying cash. I've gone into a lot of stores and stuff. They don't even offer a way to take cash anymore. So it's a real problem when everything's on a card. But they're going to build this really beautiful green card for you. Everything of your bank accounts, your credit history, your medical, everything will be on that card. But through that card, they'll be able to track your what they call green footprint. And that's going to matter. And once they move this into a crypto system, they can just load your card with the money that they're giving you, like they give you those stimulus checks and stuff like that, so you can go out and spend. I've always thought that once they change it from a fiat currency to a cryptocurrency, they would do a 2-to-1 exchange ratio, to where they're actually giving you two crypto tokens for the $1, because then you would go out and spend those dollars. And if they keep loading your card with money and forcing you to spend it within a certain duration of time, like say 30 days, or you potentially could lose that money or be um, it could be a negative factor if you're not spending the money. I don't know how this would all work, but in a debt credit system, they want you to spend the money, especially if they're giving you the money. If you're working for the money, that's one thing. But if they're physically giving you the money, they're going to want you to spend that money. So just realize that there's a lot going on out here as we move forward. The fiat dollar is in trouble. Every 70 years or so, we see the fiat currency change from, let's say, the British pound to the dollar. And we're going to see the dollar change from that to something else soon. You have a division between the East and West, between BRICS and us, and our crypto service system that we're putting in place, which is the Fed now, or the SDRs. So there's a battle between BRICS and our Fed now, or SDRs. We'll have to see how that plays out as the world divides in two, and you have an Eastern and a Western bloc, potentially not a global currency anymore. They could be regional currencies, or uh, specific geopolitical or geographical currencies, even potentially local currencies. As the dollar breaks down, we see that in some areas where they use, their own dollars, or their what they call bucks, and then they can go out and spend it in their local, economies and different things like that. So you might see fragmentation, so that people can gain control over the system and not necessarily have to be on the public system or on the system that the government wants you into. So I think it's important. You can come out and look at this clock at any time. It's extremely informative, has a lot of information, can teach you a lot of these terms. I think it's important that you understand how the economy works. I'm still learning. So there's no way you can know everything out here. It's impossible. So just try to educate yourself as best as possible. Understand that we are in a debt credit system. It works off of basically you going out and spending money continuously to keep the system running. And when you stop spending the money, that's when the system crashes. And that's what we're getting ready to walk into. This is the big problem that we're having right now. We're going to watch us walk into the first quarter of 24. You're going to see massive layoffs at the beginning of the year. You're going to see massive defaults in everything from commercial, auto, and homes. No one has additional income. The stimulus checks have run out. The student loans have started back up. All these things are hitting everybody. Mortgages are up. Rent's up. Food's up. Anything that matters to you is up. Cars are up. Your payment structure on all these things are up. Credit cards and the money that they're charging you at potentially 20 to 30% is moving up, and you see these huge credit card debts that are being piled up as we do buy it now, pay later type stuff. This is not going to improve, and you need to get out of debt so you're not enslaved to the system. Anytime you take a loan out, you indebt yourself to someone or an institution. You become a slave to that person until you become out of debt and you pay it off. So don't get in debt. Don't place yourself in this position. It's just extremely important, especially as you move forward, that you protect yourself. As we get into this new year and we start to see these massive layoffs and this huge slowdown of this economy, it is going to stagnate, okay, but hyperinflate at the same time. And that's when you get into that third seal event, and that's a problem because a day's wages won't pay for a loaf of bread. You won't be able to feed your families every day because the prices are so expensive that you can't afford the food. And you especially can't afford the food if you don't have a job anymore. And the government's telling you through the mandates of Jay Powell, he's going to control inflation through unemployment. He wants to force pain on us. Remember that? He told you that a while back. He's going to force pain on you, and he's going to force it on you soon because you're going to see a lot of layoffs happening, and that's one of his mandates is to force people to stop spending money so inflation will come down. And since core has not come down since the beginning of this nightmare, he has not gained any of his mandates, and he's not gaining anywhere. And so this is just going to get ugly as we move into the first of the year, and we see these massive slowdown, potentially a first and second quarter that are negative GDP, which would then force us into another technical recession. So God bless everybody. Have a great night. Find the open door. Find Jesus. Keep your eye on everything. Get out of debt. Don't be enslaved to the system. That is the last thing you want, is to be enslaved into any system on this earth. So God bless and have a great night.